Welcome back. As we've noted, U.S. President Donald Trump is signaling that his administration could move ahead with 25% tariffs on Canadian goods shipped into the United States as early as next month, the first day of February. Speaking at the White House while signing executive orders, Trump suggested February 1st as the date on which those tariffs may be applied. For his part, Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc here in Canada says Ottawa is ready to respond to any scenario. For more on all of this, we're joined by Pierre Ouimet, head investment strategist at UBS Canada. He joins us, as you can see right now. Pierre, thanks a lot for joining us. So here we go. We are a couple of weeks away, perhaps, from remarkably high tariff barriers on every single product we ship to our largest customer. How do we make sense of this now?
Well, I think we should just look at it as a threat, and that's pretty well all it is, really, for the time being, at least. I mean, a lot of things have to happen before you go through with 25% tariffs. I mean, there is a free trade agreement between Canada, U.S., and Mexico in place right now. I mean, there are provisions in there for incremental tariffs, and there are some provisions in there also for contesting whatever tariffs are put on place. There's also the World Trade Organization as well, and of course, it could be some tariffs that could be Canada could respond in like with tariffs on U.S. products coming into Canada. I hope it doesn't come to that. I mean, our feeling is that overall the cooler heads will prevail. And the threat of tariffs is probably more of an effective tool than the actual tariffs. You know, it's as long as you have that threat out there, you can maybe exact some concessions out of the target government. And it seems like they're wielding a very, very heavy stick in order to enact some minimum of concessions, really, of Canada. I mean, I don't think these accusations about drug trafficking and lax border situation, I think they're somewhat hilarious, really, when you think of it, compared to the southwest border in the U.S., for example. This administration seems to be lumping Canada in with Mexico in terms of how bad we behaved in the past. Now, I think in the end, February 1st is probably not going to happen. And if there are some tariffs that are to be imposed, I think they should probably impose them in a more incremental basis. The thing is, if you swing for the fence right away and you miss the ball, then you're kind of stuck, really. What are you going to do next in order to exact any concessions? The best solution would be for some of the northern states out of the U.S. and some of the senators and governors from those states to exact some pressure on the Trump administration, and I think they will. And I think Trump is just being as bellicose as he usually is in terms of moving this whole thing ahead. So in the end, I don't think it's going to be 25% tariffs, because if it is, it's going to be a disaster. And if they do that to Canada, what can they do to China or Europe or Mexico, of course? And why would they do it to Canada and not do it to Mexico? So it's very confusing, and it's just adding to what I call the headline volatility that we're going to have to live with this year in the markets. So welcome to Trump 2.0.
And there's already lots of volatility in the Canadian market in terms of individual stocks that are perceived by investors as being very sensitive to U.S. tariffs. Case in point, Bombardier shares up and down like a yo-yo, up yesterday by 7%. Today, losing almost all that ground on those headlines from Trump's comment in the Oval Office yesterday. Those were the comments in which he specified February 1st, or estimated, I should say, February 1st as the day on which, quite possibly, 25% tariffs would be applied to Canada. Another one, Canadian Natural Resources, the oil giant, up by more than 4% yesterday, excuse me, giving back much of that advance today. What are the implications for the Canadian stock market of this tariff story?
Well, I can't say it's immune to tariffs, because it isn't. That would be really not saying the truth. There is some immunity because a lot of our Canadian revenues are generated south of the border in U.S. dollars. Obviously, the higher the tariff, the lower the Canadian dollar. So there's somewhat of a hedge from that perspective. I think the big risk is that they slap a tariff on Canadian energy exports. That could be electricity. It would mostly be oil and natural gas, but that would be shooting themselves in the foot. I can't understand that anyone who's got a head on their shoulders would think of imposing tariffs in an environment where they want to probably see oil prices go lower overall. And have an positive impact on inflation in terms of reducing it, why would they go ahead and try to, but with tariffs increasing energy prices in the U.S.? It doesn't seem very, very logical, combined with the fact that, they'll probably impose further sanctions on Iran, tighter sanctions on Iran, and that's probably going to mean less oil in the market. And also they announced today they want to fill up the strategic petroleum reserves. That's 300 million barrels. Think of it, 300 million barrels is almost 1 million barrels a day over 1 year. It's so on one hand, they're trying to do something in terms of promoting their own industry and helping presumably the U.S. consumer, which they're not doing at all. And on the other hand, they're going to put in price policies that are going to just restrict the amount of supply on the market or increase the demand, particularly from the SPR. In which case, that means that prices actually could gravitate upwards. And that would have a negative impact on inflation, notwithstanding the fact that all other products that are subject to tariffs will also have an impact on inflation. I can't understand. There is an economic council to the White House. I can't understand that these worries aren't connected or somehow voiced within reasonable discussions on economic policy. So I think it's just Trump being Trump, and that's it. And I think in the end, through much volatility, unfortunately, in the end, things will work out for Canada. And hopefully where Canada wants to be is inside the fence. And I think the advantage of the U.S. would have more of a North American energy policy. And if they will look at the way the political winds are blowing here in this country, that could easily happen at some point down the road. But clearly the current administration in Ottawa is not the one that's going to get any positive response out of the Trump administration in the U.S. So that also begs the question, what happens politically in this country going forward?